Hi everybody, I'm Cameron Robertson. I'm one of the core contributors at Kong. And let's see, perfect. So Kongland is a DAO, we're a crypto state, we're working on physical chips. We've worked for a long time in making physical crypto. But the question is, like, why is this happening now? Why did we decide to focus on bringing digital into physical and vice versa? I think clearly the concept and the idea of crypto in the metaverse is here to stay. You know, we've gone from last cycle, crypto being a scam, to NFTs blowing up, to only digital is worth something. And we believe that the synthesis of all of these things is actually the truth. That in fact, crypto will be ubiquitous around us in everything. And by everything, we mean, you know, clothing, collectibles, toys, etc. Also, I always like to show this chart. I feel like, you know, after this last cycle, some people may have said we crossed the chasm into mainstream or early adopters. I don't think that's quite the case. I think that, you know, we've gotten close. There's a lot of awareness about crypto with NFTs. But when you think about the growth and the number of users, you know, the internet has billions of users. Crypto is still tens of billions. So we have another billion people still to onboard. So there's a lot of time. So a bit about how we started at Kong and really our background. We like to think about getting more people usable crypto experiences. We've all set up wallets, we've all gone through that, and we took a step back and we said, what if crypto was more like cash? And so that's a bit anachronistic because cash, of course, is something that's going away, but it's been around for a long time. You know, there's other great important things about cash. There's no direct transaction costs. You can easily use it to buy goods and services. And it's really intuitive. So if someone destroys cash, it's gone. So they understand, unlike a hardware wallet where you lose your keys or something like that, and you're like, where's my crypto gone? If you lose a note, then obviously you can no longer spend it. So one of the first ways that folks played around with making physical crypto cash, this is an ancient Bitcoin paper note, was effectively just printing a private QR code, which is actually not that terrible because you could scan it, immediately direct the person to setting up a wallet, and they could claim the Bitcoin. But the biggest problem with this is that it's obviously not transferable from party to party to party. The first person who encounters the private key can take the Bitcoin off of it, and even if they don't take it off right away, they can of course duplicate it. So it's missing one of these key characteristics of cash, which is infinite transferability from party to party. But you know, it's super usable. Of course, hardware wallets are an interesting way to approach this. You can gift people hardware wallets, but there's a lot of complexity there. I think between setting up a MetaMask and setting up a hardware wallet, arguably hardware wallets are a bit trickier. And on top of that, you know, there's this security implication of having to trust the firmware. So if you have a hardware wallet with broken firmware, you pass it on to multiple people. Eventually, people may figure out ways to extract the private keys through other means. So you have this large firmware attack surface. So our solution to this was Kong.cash. The microphone. This is a Kong.cash note. I'm happy to show it to folks afterwards. This is effectively a full computer, and it has a few interesting features to it. Oh, and quick demo of the app. So basically, Kong.cash note is scannable via NFC. So with the Kong.cash smartphone app, you can tap the note, and you're able to verify and say, okay, this note is actually backed by an ERC20 token on Ethereum. And in the case of a Kong.cash note, we allow it to be transferable from person to person because we actually use a lock on the smart contract so that you can't unlock and claim the tokens for a certain amount of time. So like normal cash, this has a printed face value. We made notes from 1 to 500, so we have like a 10 and a 20 and a 50. You understand what the value is. It's intuitive. You can touch and feel it. We have a smart contract. The smart contract is what also creates the time lock. So it's an escrow contract. You deposit funds into it. And then lastly, a secure element chip. And so the secure element chip is really interesting. Unlike a standard microcontroller or a chip that you would find in an IoT device, a secure element chip has a really limited set of functionality. It can generate keys, it can sign information, and most importantly, you can set it such that the keys are non-extractable. So the private key should always live within the chip. And really, unless there's something broken about the chip, it's very difficult to extract. Kind of diving a bit deeper into this, it's a pretty broad class of chips. And as I noted, we have these specific characteristics. Big challenge we faced, we started this project in 2019, is massive chip shortage. So throughout COVID, people staying home, ordering more devices, all sorts of issues in the supply chain. So we've had to start to diversify the chips that we source from. But generally, we're still looking for these core features of they generate their own private keys, you can't get the private key out, and you can generate signatures from those. So what it really boils down to is trust in physical crypto as a cash note, which means trust in keys. So how you store that crypto, where you store that crypto. And so keys are really critical to how we think about bearer instruments in crypto. We like to generalize that away from the cash idea to a broader idea of what we call a silicon lock contract or silo. So the idea here is these are cash notes, but we can come up with silicon lock contracts that are NFTs or other DeFi instruments. You can have yielding assets, a physical bond, crypto art, crypto merch. So last year, we'd been working on Kong.cash for a while, and we had some interest in the chips. We decided to launch Kong Land, which is the DAO for creators to come get access to the chips and go off and build new experiences. One of the things in Kong Land we like to say is Kong morning. Everyone greets each other this way. We have our own sort of culture that's built up over the last year here. And so Kong Land is really thinking about digital property rights in the physical world. So in the same way that someone buys an NFT on Ethereum and they can hold it and own it themselves without a third party arbitrating that, we think that's critical for people who are making physical NFTs. So if you go off and you put a QR code and you call it a physical NFT, you don't have all these properties of transferability. And we think that's really important. Or building the metaverse IRL is another way to say it. Kongland is structured as a DAO where we take in tokens, chips, creators' labor, and we export out fashion, art, and identity. And we think that as a crypto state, structurally, this made a lot of sense. One of the first things that we came up with within Kongland is the Kongland Citizen Passport. So the Citizen Passport uses the same chips that we embed in the Kong.cash notes here. It basically is both a physical and digital asset, so it links to your Kongland NFT, and it allows you to basically participate our IRL and Kongland events and attest to the fact that you have this NFT. One of the first projects that we worked with was MetaFactory. MetaFactory approached us in March of 2020 after seeing the Kong.cash notes, and they said, hey, we're launching this DAO with this crypto-first, crypto-native brand. We'd really like to start to integrate your chips. And so we took the cash note that we had a bunch in stock, and we actually chopped off just the chip portion. And those got embedded into the first MetaFactory releases. The really cool thing about it is they give you this authenticity. So you can scan the chip, and you can authenticate, and you can say, okay, this is a real MetaFactory hoodie. But more interestingly, they were one of the first groups to pioneer the idea of NFT wearables being linked with a physical. And so they're finally starting to deliver on this, where you'll be able to buy the physical jacket or any of their historical physical items and then reference it on chain. So you'll have this 3D wearable that you can take into crypto voxels that mirrors your digital one. And only you have the capability to use that because you're the one who owns the garment with the chip. There are other drops. These have been in the wild. They're actually going to take part in receiving, I think we're dropping them citizenship into Kongland. They'll get tokens dropped. So you can also use these chips as a really interesting physical airdrop mechanism. And again, using signatures and signing recent block hashes, you have a good guarantee that the current person with the jacket is in fact the right person to claim the token off of it. Materium is another project that's been working on sort of the real world asset physical side for a long time, since 2016, 2017. They approached us because they had historical collectibles that they wanted to add on the blockchain. So this is a Captain Kirk figurine, which is actually signed by the actor, and it has the Kong chip embedded under the label under the signature. I think this is an interesting experiment in taking old traditional physicals and trying to put them trying to turn them into NFTs. I do think this approach is more challenging. So if you're starting fresh with a new MetaFactory jacket, the value of the jacket is ambiguous as to whether it's in the crypto asset that you're getting from it, the physical jacket, or something in between, the hybrid of both. When you're tagging old classical existing collectibles like this, you have an existing collector's market, and really the question comes down to, okay, are you going to increase the value by adding this chip to it and saying it's an NFT? Probably not. But the interesting thing that Ethereum is now doing is they're starting to do similar approaches with things like gold bars. So there's a lot of gold bars which are actually very well known. There's something called the good delivery system because there's a lot of gold which is extracted from conflict areas and so forth. And so Ethereum is saying, okay, knowing where gold bar came from is really important, and using these chips, we can make them blockchain trackable. So they've done a lot of work in this space and thought a lot about it. LootLarp is one of the coolest projects. So LootLarp is one of the first projects to emerge after we announced Kongland last year. So some of the early citizens from Kongland came together and they said, hey, we want to use these chips and embed them into these weapons based on the loot NFT drop. And we thought, what are you guys talking about? This is crazy. But what they're really talking about is toy plastic and vinyl weapons. So even though these look highly accurate, and they're full-sized, they're in fact made out of foam and plastic. And the idea is they want to create IRL gaming, so real-life gaming using these at a LARP or a live-action role-play event where people can like fight it out with these weapons. And in fact, they did that at ETH Denver. They had a test run and people were fighting with these weapons. But the really cool part comes in with the chip. So because of the chip in here, this is where you start to bridge back into the digital world. You actually can track yourself in a quest, IRL and digitally. So before someone has a fight, they'll go in and scan each other's weapons chips. They can then have a cryptographic proof that they interacted with each other, and they can, whoever wins the fight or whoever the points get recorded. And those quests can weave in and out of physical and digital. So sometimes the gameplay can be completely digital via the smartphone, and sometimes it's happening physically. So it's really a cool project. Recommend checking it out. LootLarp, probably .xyz. And yeah, they're planning on having this massive event where they're releasing these publicly. But just a novel use case of the project that I never would have come up with. Here's another really just, again, insane application of the chip. So RxTX Studio is about selling NFTs which give you the rights and design to 3D print generative lampshades. So these go onto the lamps, you can 3D print them, you can preview them in AR, and then once you've 3D printed them, you can attach the chip to attest to the fact that you own that NFT. So it's this radical sort of reverse manufacturing idea where it's not about the thing itself, but it's about owning the right to create the thing and then attesting to the fact that you could do that in the real world. Again, mind-bending, wouldn't have come up with this myself, and this is why in Kongland we like recruiting creators with these really incredible ideas. So yeah, you can, again, explore it in virtual, print it out, take the printed one, attach the chip, and then the chip is linked to the NFT. Pretty radical. Textile. Textile is focused on one-of-a-kind runway fashion items. Again, they want to do authenticity to say, okay, this piece was worn by this model at this point in time. So again, kind of a little bit more conventional, but very different than a MetaFactory model of creating new clothing, in fact, tagging historical clothing that's existed before. And then one of my favorites, again, just so far beyond anything that I would have come up with. So Kongland citizen came and he said, okay, I'm a glass blower, and specifically bongs for smoking weed. And he said, I know a lot about different ways to embed different things into glass, which is very tricky because obviously the glass is superheated to thousands of degrees and the chips would melt. but he's found special ways and resins and things to do this. Normally, these glass pieces in the glass community can sell for, like high NFT prices, tens of thousands of dollars US. And so it only made sense to say, okay, obviously, yes, we can have a chip in here to authenticate it, but what are the crypto experiences? What are the IRL metaverse experiences that you can have by embedding this chip into the bong? And so right now, he's designing and exploring that space of, you can, anytime that you take a puff off of the bong, you can actually get a POAP from the chip and prove that you were there and interacted with the bong. So it's kind of like a gaming process, but it's just like mind-blowing. We really want to encourage physical creators to come up with these awesome ideas, and then we supply them with the chips to explore them. It's not just about, let's chip a piece of clothing. It's about, let's radically change your experience with the physical world through through the chip. So one other piece about this, obviously we talked about the Kong.cash and the silo notes and this idea of chips and how we use very specific chips. But broadly, our mission around chips is just getting people to understand that silicon is the bedrock of how we interact with crypto. So all of our computers, our smartphones, et cetera, they're all based on chips. Right now, there's no visibility into the process of manufacturing chips. Typically, it's closed end from top to bottom. So even if you have an open source design for a chip, it doesn't really matter because the factory has their own processes of taking that chip and making it into the actual atoms. And so we really want to bring light to this because not all chips are equal. And when we're talking about physical crypto, where you want to have a jacket or shoes or some other item that lasts for 20 or 30 or 100 years, you want to think about that. If you're on a closed platform, for instance, and they have their own custom chip and their servers go down, can you scan your item? And so, coming back to this tweet, we broadly think that better chips enhance everything in Web3 because everything in Web3 is going to rely on your private key, and everything in Web3 is going to be arbitrated by your ability to sign transactions and say, I'm this person, here's my DID, I'm this person, and I authenticate this. The next version of Twitter or Twitter replacement will be some Web3 version of it. And again, better chips helps to enhance that. So where are we today? Across the Kong notes, Silo chips, and our upcoming Halo chips, we've created and shipped close to 20,000. We do all sorts of projects. We have a lot of creators who do one-offs. We have some creators who do thousands of units. We're looking forward to scaling that and bringing down the costs for creators. Right now, it's between $5 and $10 depending on how many you order. We want to decrease that. Generally, I like to say that the cost per chip is less than the transaction fee on L1 to mint an NFT, but obviously there's a lot of applications where people want to mint lower cost NFTs. So this is our latest generation chip that we just announced this year. Set it down. So this is a Halo chip. It's really simple, really robust, has a lot of cool features to it. We call it a physical NFT chip, but really, it's quite remarkable because it's effectively acting as a simple hardware wallet. So each one of these chips has its own ECDSA key pair that you can generate an address from. And that means that you can do anything that a wallet can. So you can generate signatures that you use on chain. You can store ERC20s. You can store NFTs. You can store any DeFi instrument. So incredibly powerful. It has all the properties that we talked about before where it generates its own key pair and it never exposes that. And more critically, so I showed you a video of the Kong.cash app. This is really cool because it doesn't require a dedicated app. We worked out a way, both in Android and iOS, where you can actually tap a chip and interact entirely via the browser. And we think this is really critical because our suspicion is Apple and Google are going to start to clamp down on crypto apps. And this empowers people anywhere to interact with these chips via the browser. And it's very hard for them to shut off those APIs. So these chips are available today. We have a bunch in stock. We started shipping them in projects. The next piece of this is not so much related to chips, but when you think about the chips on chain. So this can generate a signature which transfers an asset, but that can be kind of dangerous. So if someone just loads an NFT onto this wallet and you go to an event and someone scans it, they can generate a transaction to pull the NFT off. So we need to think a little bit more carefully about how we come up with some locking mechanisms or claim mechanisms around that. And one of the ideas that we've been focusing on recently with projects is the notion of soul-bound physical NFTs. So the idea of a soul-bound NFT has recently been getting some traction, whereby you have an NFT which is tied to a wallet and you can never transfer it. We're doing a similar experience with physical, where you have a physical where the NFT is permanently tied to the chip. So in the case of a MetaFactory jacket, you have the digital NFT of the jacket. You as the holder of the jacket can assign yourself as the owner, but you can never actually transfer out that NFT and resell it. And so it's a really interesting concept. The biggest downside, of course, is you can't just flip the NFT on OpenSea. You need to create a new kind of exchange, which is more like an eBay meets OpenSea than existing exchanges. But the upside is you have this notion of a really long-lived NFT embedded in the clothing. And so as a result, it's a bit safer to use chips like this, because the signature will just change who the owner of the chip is. And even if you go to a party and someone signs a transaction, they claim the owner, once you're back home wearing your jacket, you can always reclaim it. And so the on-chain portion of this, we're actually working with a couple of other physical projects who've worked on creating chips and embedding them. One of them is called IYK. They do these amazing things for claiming POAPs. Another one is called Veralink. We're working together on an open standard called the Ethereum Reality Service. So the Ethereum Reality Service, we haven't released a one-pager on this yet, but will soon, is similar to ENS conceptually. And the idea is it's acting as a resolution, so you scan a chip, and then you can understand what assets are associated with it on-chain, be it NFTs, soul-bound NFTs, ERC20s, airdrops, anything you can claim from it. And we want this to be a public good. So the ERS is being built largely by Kongland and these other folks working on it, but we're really excited by the notion of, okay, once we have this out there, you can understand what kind of chip is embedded in this thing. Can I always scan it if a server goes down? And as I mentioned, all the other assets that it's linked to. So we have a basic landing page with a sign-up form at ers.to if you want to take a look. Again, hopefully we'll be having a bit more to share there soon. Definitely, there's multiple EIPs that we think need to be created in the physical space. So kind of like bring this all around, our belief is strongly in self-sovereign crypto for everyone. People onboarding to exchanges is great, but they need to get off of exchanges and they need to hold their own keys. And we want to make that extremely usable, whether it's physical cash instruments, whether it's cards, whether it's clothing. Let's bring crypto into the real world and simplify. We believe that the base of that is actually creating better chips and understanding the nature of those chips, and then having public ways to resolve them. And lastly, Kongland is a project focused on this initiative. We're a DAO. We welcome everyone to drop in the Discord. And we're looking at creating a visa-type program for our DAO. So right now you have to buy the citizenship NFT, which is kind of expensive. But we have a lot of creators saying, hey, I can't buy that, but I want to build. So hopefully soon we'll have kind of a visa-type program where for free you can come in and build in Kongland and basically earn citizenship. Thanks a lot. I'm Cameron Robertson. Take a look at HTTPS Kongland.